All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to do a Q&A panel. You guys have submitted questions, so we are going to fire them up here on the confidence monitor, and we're just going to go right down the line until we run out of time. And then, but don't leave after the Q&A panel because Chad has a giveaway, so we want to make sure we get books. Shh. Golly. We love Nathan. Okay, so do I have to do anything to make it come up? Oh, I got to do that? Oh, look at that. That's fantastic. I don't know that either. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and read it, but Robbie, and then we're going to just pass the mic all the way down. And so we'll go ahead and get this started. So you guys submitted questions on Slido.com. You know all about that stuff. Robbie Davidson, what can we do to help new flat earthers find the quality videos on platforms like YouTube?
Well, I would say number one would be if you're looking for biblical cosmology, biblical flat earth videos, I run a 24/7 stream on Celebrate Truth on YouTube. So I feature pretty much the top Christian or biblical flat earth YouTube videos. Now, if you're looking for something scientific or something outside of the biblical arena, I would say Globebusters is a great channel as well. Patricia with Flat Earth and Other Hot Potatoes, she interviews quite a few people throughout the years on Flat Earth and does a tremendous job at that. But there's a lot of great resources. But I would say that Globebusters would be great because they feature a lot of interviews with a lot of speakers. And also, if you're looking for the biblical one, I do feature some really, really great content creators on Celebrate Truth 24/7.
Great, thanks, Robbie. Next question is for Jared Cressman. Jared, what were the 3 books you mentioned earlier in your first talk?
Oh my goodness, they were, okay, Nazis and the Occult. There are 2 books called Nazis and the Occult. You'll find one by Dusty Sklar, another one by Paul Roland. And then there was Game of Gods by Carl Teichrib. Carl Teichrib's book is brand new. His book is not specifically about the Nazis. It's about this forcible movement towards sort of this global shift in what he refers to as re-enchantment, which is paganism, coming full circle from secularism to paganism. But to make the points of what's happening in our society, he has to draw upon certain things that happened in that time frame that I spoke of the other night. So there's a wealth of information, not only for what's happening today, but there is a wealth of information about what took place with the Nazis, and I found it to be incredibly helpful even in my own research. So Game of Gods, and then 2 different books by the name of Nazis and the Occult, Paul Roland, Dusty Sklar, great books.
Okay, great, thanks, Jared. Yeah, I can pass that along. The next question is for Al Morenton. Al, what advice would you give to someone trying to get into the cannabinoid business?
Just work for someone, and someone that you find that you can agree with their philosophy, and then just learn from them. And yeah, you have to apprentice underneath somebody and find out what's going on. That's the best way.
Great. Thanks, Al. Okay, Emily, have you examined affirming theology that the Bible, when correctly understood, does not condemn homosexuality? If so, provide specific examples of disagreement. So affirming theology.
I've never heard of that, but I can't find any. Well, cults are based on Bible verses. So it doesn't make it true just because you use a few verses to win favor with your activities. And I find mostly it's just a way to excuse it. There's well enough verses in the Bible that do not condone homosexuality. And I mean, it's really clear, but offhand we have the one in Leviticus, men do not lie with men, women do not lie with women. And in Romans 1, read the whole chapter. It talks about sodomites not getting into the kingdom. I think that's pretty clear. And it's, I deal with families occasionally and they're worried about their children getting into heaven. And could it be all grace? You accept the Lord and then it doesn't matter what you do and it's all going to fall under grace? Or is it going to fall under these Bible verses? Is it really worth the risk for eternity for your soul?
Well, great answer, Emily. Okay, so we've got Dan Noel. Dan, why was Building 7 targeted for demolition?
Your conspiracy theory is as good as mine. And this is an interesting question. It may even be important, but it's not essential. What's essential about Building 7 is that the world should know and doesn't. The question, the most dangerous question about Building 7 is why didn't television report what happened, irrespective of whether it's an accidental office fire or a controlled demolition? That question dwarfs whatever else is in there. Now, many people have researched why Building 7 was targeted, and if you go to the internet, you'll find a trove of possible reasons, and there are probably many others that researchers have not found. And there's one more reason to work on the censorship of Building 7. Whenever the censorship is out of the way, the reasons for Building 7 destruction will be abundant and clear.
Great, Dan. I think one of the things about Building 7 that strikes me is the day before 9/11 was an announcement that Donald Rumsfeld made. I think we all know about that, missing $3 trillion. Oops. And one of the understandings that I have is one of the floors that occupied Building 7, as well as the specific area that the Pentagon was hit, were the exact location of the accounting departments that were investigating where that money went. That is one of the things I think Dan was talking about. So crazy. All right, go on to the next thing. Paul, on the plane, do you know of any independent sources or personnel, etc., that have tried to launch their own equipment into quote-unquote space?
Well, I think we've all seen the Go Fast rocket. That was, well, I guess, independent, not as far as I know, not tied to any government space agency. I know there's a lot of rules when it comes to that. I think you have to file a plan with the FAA like 45 days in advance. They have to review it. They have total control whether you can do it. They're worried about, they'll tell you, worried about you launching something that's going to hit a plane or, being safe, in the area. So I'm sure there's people that do it, but the skies and space, we're told, are controlled by the FAA and the government. So anything you're going to be doing at that level probably depends on how big your rocket is. I think you can go to the national, it's nar.org. What is that? National something rocketry, National Association of Rocketry or something like that. So it's probably going to ask you, like, how big is your rocket going to be and how far does it go? And then you got to file a plan, and they have the right to shut you down. So if anybody is looking to probably launch very, very high, if they have the ability to do that, then they're going to have to jump through some hoops. So I think you can find stuff. I know there was a story, like I think it was on the Verge website or something like that, that there was somebody that launched, they said, 4 satellites into space, and the FAA didn't know about it, and they were in big trouble. So, I mean, you can find anything you want online, but I'm sure there are stories.
Great, thanks, Paul. Okay, Mark, have you ever considered extending an invitation or an offer of collaboration to any celebrities that might be willing to help spread the truth of Flat Earth?
Yes. Yes, I have considered extending an invitation, yes, to several celebrities. Yeah, you bet. I mean, look, we part of the reason, of course, the biggest reason why Flat Earth has done what it's done is because of all the people that are involved. The people, the boots on the ground, the people making the sheer amount of content that's out on YouTube. But we have had quite a bit of help bringing in new members into that content through the celebrity world, whether it be sports or entertainment. And yes, that is already in the works, and hopefully we'll be able to get some dividends from that soon.
Right on. Chad Taylor, have you shared your book with your pastor? And if so, what was their response?
That's a great question. I just got over my black eye recently. But no, just joking. Actually, my pastor is a big reason for the book being around. When I first understood how the Bible actually was describing Earth, I was like, well, how am I gonna present this to him? Because he's a Vietnam vet in his 70s. I have huge amounts of respect for him. And so week after week, I was like, how am I going to bring this up to him? And eventually, it just kind of is probably a Holy Spirit kind of thing where it just came to me. I'm like, you know what I'll do? I'll get those clear sheets of plastic with some, wet erase markers, and I'll draw day 1, and then flip a slide, and then day 2, and then flip, and then day 3. And so what I did is I'd, read this section. I'd show day 1, day 2, day 3, and what it was actually really saying. And so that visual going along with the verses, I could tell it really clicked for him instead of just trying to explain and expecting him to see what I saw in my head. And so after that, I was like, wow, these visuals are really helpful. And then it dawned on me about assembling this book and putting it together. Now, he's been nothing but supportive of this process. We've prayed over the project, and he's coming around to this. But like I said, he's been nothing but supportive. He's certainly not a flat earther by any means, but he has never argued any verses or chapter or verse with me at all, because he knows there's something there. So, he's taken time, but great guy, by the way.
Cool. Great. All right, we'll just pass that back on through here and get on to our next one. Back to Robbie. Robbie, we should start our own YouTube. What do you think of that? Pointers for starting a channel? Question mark.
Honestly, I talk to a lot of people, and I encourage them all the time. I say, listen, you don't need special effects. You don't need to know all the equipment. All you have to do, and everyone has one of these, is grab your phone and turn it around and start talking to it. And you're going to find that there are so many people that resonate with what you're saying. And one by one, you'll start with a couple subscribers, and then from 10, 20, 30, and you'll be surprised at how many people are saying, I'm thinking the same thing. Wow, speak some more. What do you think of this? They'll ask you questions. And everyone can do it. Everyone has a voice. It's not about having 100,000 subscribers. It's not about having 100 subscribers. It's about every one of us using what we have. And that technology is in our pocket. And all you have to do, just like vlogging they call it, is just do a daily vlog and talk to it. It's scary the first time you do it, but you'll be surprised how easy it becomes once you've done your first time. Put it out there and see what comes back. You might be surprised.
Very good. Thanks, Robbie. Okay, Jared, can you expand on your theory about what World War II was about, please?
It's funny. I hated watching these documentaries as a kid. And I hated being forced to look at World War II, and I just never thought I'd ever be on a stage answering a question about what do you think World War II was about? And then I just asked myself, what am I doing with my life right now? There's a lot about World War II I don't know. Like I said, I'm not a historian. I hit a niche in World War II that appealed to my own areas of research. It appears to me that World War II was a war between secret societies more than anything. You could look at it the same way that banks go to war now. I just think that it was a time period where it was a perfect storm of events, and I think enough evidence is there that at least the powers that be at that time were warring. You saw competing forms of magic, different styles. Something I've had a hard time vetting, but I've always been very interested in, just to highlight this point, was the German symbol, or, it was somewhat ritualistic in nature, everybody's seen, and about the same time, we had the peace, right? So it was like, when you look at the roots of those, and like I said, I haven't been able to vet this to the extent that I'm totally comfortable saying this is a fact, but it seems like one represented fire, one represented water, and it was like competing forms of magic. We'll extinguish fire with water. It's like, you got to understand, in the world of magic, like sometimes anything goes. You could take anything and turn it into a ritual. You just use something at your disposal to focus your mind in exerting your will and trying to manipulate realities. I don't think there's any real power in this or that, but they certainly believe it. And so what I'm saying is, when you're looking at this war between secret societies and all this other stuff that came out, what you're seeing is a clash of ideologies that are largely rooted in forms of mysticism and the occult. And I think there's enough evidence there to say that behind the scenes, World War II, in its inception and its conclusion and everything that happened afterward, was largely a result of secret societies hashing things out with blood.
Wow, thanks, Jared. That's pretty crazy. Okay, Al, have you researched any other methods or ways one can activate the cannabinoid receptors in the brain?
Well, yeah. As far as like with activating cannabinoid receptors with food, the raw cacao is one of the only other foods that actually has something in there called anandamide, and that binds the cannabinoid receptors. And I was talking about that yesterday. They bring it, the ones that we have And it's brought down on donkeys down to my friend's processing plant in Ecuador, and it's like super pristine. But that stuff is awesome. It has to be like unadulterated, right, in its raw form. So it's a chocolate, but it's in its most pristine form. It has theobromine, all kinds of stuff in there as well. But the anandamide, they call it the bliss molecule, but it actually binds to the receptors and it helps me see better. Yeah, and then also for just brain training, just doing figuring stuff out. Always learning. Always using your brain. You always got to do that. I do that every day.
Fantastic. So that was raw cacao. Awesome.
So it's
awesome.
chocolate?
Yeah.
Cacao. Yeah.
Cool. Oh, I concur. I love you, man.
All right, Emily, can you re-explain the connection of cats to homosexuality?
Whew, in 90 seconds. No, she's good. Patricia and I have talked. We're good.
Didn't even think about it.
Didn't come out right. Boy, re-explain it. I'm trying to think of how I can condense it. Well, cats are known for this parasite that's in their cat litter boxes. And we as humans have been known to catch it, basically. That's why they want pregnant women to stay away from their cat litter boxes. Right? We've all heard that? So, toxoplasmia is a parasite that gets in the brain, and it turns off the center for consequences. Not kidding. And it ups the serotonin levels when you have illicit sex. So you have more pleasure and no consequences. So you don't have that morning after regret feeling for the most part when you have this toxoplasmia. They say 87% of car accidents are caused by people with toxoplasmia because they're people that have no fear, basically. And they're the people that tailgate and extreme sports and gamble a lot and other things. So to homosexuality, even when I went to this physician, if you will, and she did this long test on me, she said, it's going to be interesting to see if you have the toxoplasmia. So this is not just me, this is not just a few people. People in the healthcare industry and more the natural side are recognizing that this is a possible factor. So many in the homosexual community, I've heard it be joked about that there's a lot of cats, and I looked it up, and there was some research done that they seem to have a lot of cats, and there's a cat museum in San Francisco for cats where you can have them being taken care of. And so these toxoplasma also make you crave, or at least you're okay with, cat urine. Because they're supposed to get in the rodents, and then they crave the cats and have sex with the cats. Doesn't do a really good thing for the rodents because they get eaten. So but it is connected in this really weird way. So.
Wow, that is a trip. I'm gonna get rid of my cat. But you talked about the turpentine. Is it a cleanse or?
Right. It's a.
Oh, sorry.
Turpentine, in its root, is an essential oil, not the kind you get at Home Depot. People have done it with the kind of Home Depot, but I don't recommend that. And this is something you really have to figure out for yourselves. I don't want to promote it, but it is an essential oil, and it's all about dosage. You don't want to take too much, and it definitely kills the parasites. I personally have done it, so. And I
I
live.
think Al wants to say something real quick on that one.
All right, so the 21-day reset that I talked about yesterday, one of the things that it does is it helps to rid your body of parasites. And that's sort of why it helps to wake you up, because they actually take over your brain and help make you think differently, okay? So, and they're what make you have cravings for bad foods, all these different kinds of things, okay? So it's, that does work, what she said, but it can be very painful because you're killing off part of what's inside of you, right? So what our 21-day reset does is it actually creates an unfavorable environment for them. So there's no more basic food for them to eat inside of you, right? So it's an unfavorable environment. So it's called terrain modification. So they don't want to live inside of you anymore, so they actually just leave you and try to find another host. they go like in your waist or whatever. So it's a less painful and it's more effective. I've been doing this for 15 years.
Awesome. Thanks, Al. Yeah, and Elisa and I have done the 21-day cleanse, and it's an experience, so you should definitely... A good, positive experience, yeah. Yeah, so definitely talk to Al more about that. Dan, in your opinion, what was the real motive behind 9/11? And how did the people behind this tragedy benefit from this?
Wow, that's a good question. 9/11 was a huge operation involving multiple targets, lots of different destructions. One thing it certainly did was to scare the bejesus of humanity as a whole. This is the only time in history that a false flag has been televised live. They've never dared to do it before, and they've never done it again. The Twin Towers were televised live in front of hundreds of millions of people. So that was probably an important deliverable of 9/11. How would humanity react if we did that? And one deliverable was probably to assess the effectiveness of the censorship of 9/11 and their activities. The idea was, in the minds of the conspirators, you know, if we show what we do as obviously as by televising, we show a controlled demolition, and then we blame Osama bin Laden and his fanatics, will people buy it? We think they will. And, well, they were right. Today, many people still believe the myth that Osama bin Laden's fanatics did destroy the Twin Towers. Incidentally, with Building 7, it's the opposite. Most analysts believe that Building 7's destruction was not supposed to be televised, and it was, and now they are scared to death about it, to the point that that's the last thing they want on television. And of course, another deliverable, a side deliverable, was a reign of fear-mongering and war-mongering, which, as Dick Cheney said, could be endless. Well, I think enough said for now. Let's go to the next
Dan, let me just ask you to, well, we got a mic, but you're good. To clarify, and we had talked about this before, but I think it's a really important point. You said that you didn't think Building 7 was supposed to be televised. Was it supposed to be destroyed at another time?
Well, most experts on 9/11 agree that the destruction of Building 7 was supposed to happen at the same time as the Twin Towers. Many clues point to an attempt to demolish it at the same time as the North Tower that failed. And it took the whole afternoon to repair whatever damage was done to the controlled demolition system and get it right. And I might as well say, since this is a fairly religious gathering, that I have termed the existence of the video record of Building 7's destruction the 9/11 miracle. And to the extent that there are spiritual entities who watch over us humans with some benevolence, it is likely that they were at work to give us the gift of the video record of Building 7, which allows us to teach to humanity what the hell is going on.
Right. Thanks, Dan. Yeah, that was great. That's a great point because, you know, if that Building 7 would have gone down along with the dust and smoke of everything else, we would have never known about it. And I think that I think he was on to something when he pointed out that it was supposed to happen during all that mess. We would have never asked any questions about it. We would have never known, but either through divine intervention or some people that were involved in it that wanted to make sure it didn't go when it went, and to make sure it went when it was on TV, it was kind of a smoking gun.
Yeah, I would say that there was a sabotage on part of many agents of 9/11, and part of that sabotage was divinely inspired, and I say that as an atheist.
Thanks, Dan. That's a great point. Paul, have you seen the world's highest skydive? Oh, I think it's Felix Baumgartner video. If you have, what are your thoughts on that?
Softball. Felix was apparently, 130,000 feet? Yeah, it was underhand softball, not fast pitch. And so he skydived. That was the whole point. He skydived from 130,000 feet. A couple of things. So yeah, the fisheye lens that they used to show, or what they wanted you to see was some curvature. There's two camera shots if you watch the video. There's one from behind him when he's stepping out of the capsule, which shows that the horizon was very flat, didn't show the same curve, but the one outside the capsule did. And the important thing is when you look down at the ground from the fisheye lens, it's all brown. It looks like planet Arizona or planet New Mexico. So the curve was much too prominent. In fact, I think we have less curve from the ISS, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And well, yeah, I mean, there's the argument that the Earth doesn't move, or what was it, like, took how many hours to go up? 3 hours? And then, obviously a little bit less time to go down, but the Earth didn't move. He landed like 5 to 10 miles away. Was it that far? Thanks. I think next time I'll have Nathan handle this question. But those are Nathan and my thoughts on that.
Awesome. That's great. And you know the reason why I like a question like that, because for a lot of us, we would consider that, well, we know the answer to this question, but that means there's somebody out there that is asking these questions, and they're important because, we're all on different layers or points of the spectrum of this awakening point. So although we may think that these are easy questions, the fact that you're asking them, it means you're coming along, and we thank you for them. So all your questions are very important.
I apologize for being flippant there. So it's a good question. I mean, that's to your point. So thank you for bringing that
Cool,
up.
Paul. Yeah. All right, Mark, if you had the funding, equipment, and knowledgeable people to help you, would you replicate the Auguste Piccard 1931 high-altitude balloon flight? Flight.
Yes, absolutely, I would. As a matter of fact, at one point, I even offered to be the backup pilot for Mad Mike Hughes. And that little jaunt, and actually a balloon flight would probably seem fairly relaxing compared to that. So, I'd be happy to do it. I mean, we'd have to have some decent engineers construct something that's field. I mean, look, if Felix Baumgartner would go up there, and he jumped out, I mean, I think the ride up would be pretty smooth.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, Chad. So how do you explain the phases of the moon, such as the new moon?
Yeah, this is a great question. I get this subject asked a lot. And so biblically speaking, in day 4, the sun, moon, and stars are placed inside the firmament. It talks about two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. That's a quote. And so throughout the Bible, you see that the moon gives off its own light. The moon gives its light. King James says the moon gives her light. And so according to the Bible, the moon is giving off light. When we go take the infrared thermometer tests, which many of us have done, we consistently get colder temperatures in the direct moonlight. So whatever light it's giving off is a cooling light, meaning it's warmer in the shade. So that's pretty interesting right there. And so if the moon is giving off its own light, well, like that moon in your room toy, the kid's toy that goes on the wall, well, how does that work? Well, however some engineers manufactured this kid's toy, it can do the same exact thing. And so what is God capable of doing, having some light in the sky? What is the exact shape? What is it made of? Well, obviously we know it's not what they tell us it is, not terra firma that we can land on and that it's just a rock in space. So what is it then? And I believe that all of us right here are like 3-year-olds, and we're discussing how this Ferrari, 458 Italia sitting outside is. It's like, what is it made of? How does it work? And it's red, it's shiny. And so these are details that I think we really maybe tiny bit be able to grasp, but it's not really for us to understand exactly how it works. But so biblically speaking, it's giving off its own light, and if it's giving off and projecting whatever it is, that God wants us to see, well, for instance, the lunar eclipse, all it is going through its phases just in an hour, or however long it takes. And why is it yellow, or why is it red? Why is it blue? It's giving off whatever God is instructing it to. And lastly, if I may, we have the technology right now where there are screens where they can say, that screen can say something to me, it can say something else to Nathan here, it can say something entirely different to you. with this technology where at these different angles, it can show completely different images. And they have that, man has that technology today. And so God, that we can't even comprehend, what could he do with some kind of light emitting object in the sky, and what can he project to us? You know, I don't think we can fathom. And so, like I said, we're 3-year-olds explaining a Ferrari.
Thanks, Chad. Alrighty. And back to Robbie. So, Robbie, what are some of the biggest sources you gather your information from?
Oh wow, man! There's so many incredible like YouTube platforms. I would say amazing stuff from like Nathan Thompson. He does incredible stuff. Patricia Steer, Mark Sargent. Honestly, when it comes to the sources of bringing all the stuff, there's so many researchers going on, you know, in the community. And again, there's just the list is endless. Like I mentioned before, with Globebusters, with Jaron, Bob. The Morgal, and Iru Landucci. I would say that pretty much anyone you see me bringing out to the Flat Earth International Conferences, whether they're in Canada or the US, it represents people that are doing some incredible research, but also are really bringing an incredible community together. They see the big picture, they understand that we might not agree with everything, but the one thing that we do agree with is that we're not on a spinning ball flying through space. And right now there's massive deceptions in the world, and coming together to actually help expose those world's lies is something of great importance. And I would say that that would be the one thing that I would say when it comes to the sources that I look to, especially with the great people in the community.
Great. Thanks, Robbie. Right on. All right, Jared. So there's so much out there that suggests the Holocaust was a hoax. Do you have an opinion on that?
Yeah. Next. No. You know, I can't, I have to be honest and say I've not explored all of the available evidence. But from what I've seen, I don't buy it. I believe the Holocaust absolutely did exist. I believe that the Jews, if you look at the history of what I talked about, I think that is largely very supportive of the Holocaust. The Holocaust deniers are not looking at the hundreds of years of history that led to the Holocaust. I feel like you're going to have to debunk 200 years of the history I presented to then get someone to believe that the Holocaust didn't exist. Anti-Semitism was a way of life for a long, long time. A long time, to the extent that, remember, you had even people worshiping Gothic forms of Jesus that required the blood sacrifice of bestial subhumans. The Jew. They despised anything. They would refer to it as Jewery, the Jewry that came out of the way. It was just, anti-Semitism dripped in every ounce of their writings, their poetry, their national policy. It was rampant. And then for all of it to suddenly say that the actual attempt to annihilate the Jews, which is what they dreamed about for, since the 1800s, was somehow just a hoax, you're going to have to disprove a lot more than just the idea of a Holocaust. You're going to have to disprove the entire ideology of a people. So from what I have seen, no, I am not convinced that the Holocaust was hoax. I think it was very real, and I think millions of people died because you had a love of the occult that required blood.
Wow. Thanks, Jared. Al, if you take CBD as a medication, how might that look to an employer when applying for a job requiring a drug screening? Now, I know you covered that, but again, somebody's asking that, so.
So is that the same way as saying, will I test positive on a drug test?
I think so.
So the answer is no. And they test for THC. There's no tests. You can test for CBD, obviously, but there's none of all that stuff costs. Each specific test costs money and stuff like that. They don't test specifically for CBD. I have not seen it. We have Navy SEALs, a whole regiment on our stuff. We have fire, police, teachers, all kinds of people that get tested, and with nothing. And our stuff is THC free. So there is no stigma against it really anymore either.
Okay, great, thanks. So there's you wondering whether you can go to work on Monday and not worry about it? You don't have to worry about it.
It's all good.
Yeah, all right. Emily, will you be writing another book, and will it be on the subject of your presentation?
When I left Ohio, when I was doing another summit conference in August, I started on the plane. It was all gung-ho. And then every time I find new information, it's like, oh man, I've got to add it there and got to edit there. So I have started it, I just haven't been real proficient. I would also like to write a book about my experience raising my daughter and being really honest with things that I definitely would do differently, as I say, because, yeah. Yes, so I guess the answer is yes. I'm also writing a little flat earth book just for fun, but it's mostly memes.
All right, well, we want to see that too. All right, Dan, how many demolition teams or companies would be needed to set and detonate that amount of explosives, and how could they keep it all quiet?
Good question. And I said that there are two ways to do it. The way so many conspiracy theories go at it now, which is to painstakingly research and interview and find bits of information here and there. And the other is my method, which is just work on the censorship of 9/11. And when the censorship is out of the way, the answers will come out. As far as keeping it quiet, well, that again is a testimony to the skills of the censors of 9/11. How could they manage to get, then as I said in my presentation, one of the amazing things of 9/11 is that the engineers and highly skilled technical personnel who started to work on the demolition of the World Trade Center a couple of years before it happened knew at the beginning of their project that there would be no problem. They would not be accused of any crime, they would not go to jail, nothing would happen to them. So somehow the people who placed the work order for the job gave them assurances that no matter how obvious the controlled demolitions, the technical community would censor them, the mass media would censor them, the anti-war crowd would censor them, the liberals would censor them, etc., etc. So how they did it? Well, I have the answer to that, but the advanced 9/11 class. So, Joe, do we have 2 hours? And I'll give the explanation. I wrote a slideshow just for that.
We'll work on that, Dan, I promise. Right on. Paul, we hear so much about Stanley Kubrick filming the moon landing. What are your thoughts?
This is a good question this is a good question for Scott. Can he hear us? No, he's not. Oh. Okay, my thoughts then. That'd be a good question for Scott. We've talked about it a little bit because, yeah, that's kind of the first thing I heard is, oh, Stanley Kubrick did the moon landings. I'd be curious what evidence you have that actually exists. I haven't seen anything that he's directly involved. I've asked Scott about that. We've talked about it. So I think what his perspective was that he may have been consulted. I believe that this is speculation. I believe he was perhaps involved in some of the miniatures and some of the shooting because it coincided with the 2001 Space Odyssey, and so a lot of the video that we get of the lunar module and the command module and the thing, if you look at it, it's really clunky the way things moving around and spinning around and moving this and in the video that we received. So he may have something to do with that. As far as what we went through today, where they shot it, what appears to be in the Arizona desert and a junkyard and all that stuff that we went through today, I don't think he was involved that much at that level. I think he might have been more of a consultant, but those are my thoughts.
Thank you. And you know what we could do for some of the questions that might come in that are good for Scott? We'll see if we can get him to record the answers. We'll post them on the webpage there. Now, I know a lot of you guys probably have seen the movie or the documentary Room 237. And that one was really pretty eye-opening for me on some of the things that he talked about there. Made it seem like Stanley Kubrick was definitely involved in that stuff, but anything on that?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say that he wasn't involved at all. I think he was definitely aware of what was going on, but as far as his hand on there, I think, NASA had good stuff. This is my belief. There was an agreement, I think, between the Russians and the Americans at the time that Russians were going to be the first one to space, but because of NASA and the abilities we had with Hollywood and filming and all that, it was decided that the U.S. would be the one that walks on the moon. So I think that all those discussions were going on. Yes, I believe that the Russians and the Americans were in bed together on this thing. So, I think he was definitely aware of it, maybe part of the conversation, was involved, but his direct involvement in what we went through today, I think that he was not he wasn't in there, cut, doing that sort of thing. I don't think at that level.
Thanks, Paul. Mark, what is Flat Earth's next step in order to further prove and provide undeniable evidence about the shape of the Earth for those that may not be a Bible literal?
May not be a Bible literal. Undeniable evidence for me has always been, because people have asked me that all the time. First off, it's like, well, you got to put one of us in space, which I don't think you necessarily have to, because we have a discerning enough eye that I still think that if you put a 4K camera on the top of a decent rocket, on the top, not one of the stages that fall off, which seems to happen more often than not, and just send that sucker up until the Earth falls away and becomes a globe, and it's 4K footage, and we can analyze it, and it's completely unedited. That's the thing. Everything cuts. We all know the thing that they screw up most often is they insert computer animation, and they cut, and they cut, and they cut. And, we're used to the movies, so we're used to those quick cuts. And so that would be it for me, as far as proving the shape of the Earth. I still like, the vacuum test, putting me in there. I think that would go a long way, but that might be a one-way trip.
Yeah. Hey, real quick, Mark, on that, for some of us, or some of the people out here that don't know about the challenge, can you quickly go over that and kind of explain that to everybody what we're talking about?
Oh, I'm so dead. I know, these guys think I'm going to die. No, the challenge is pretty simple, and that is if NASA and all the other space agencies have never had a flaw, nobody's ever died from a space suit accident ever in the history of spacesuits, which is a miracle in itself, then they should have the utmost confidence for putting the civilian in said spacesuit, and not even throwing him into space, just putting him in a vacuum chamber. Non-tethered, non-G-force, non-pressurized suits. Because we solved it back in 1969. Nobody ever had a problem. So that's my challenge. Give me a freaking spacesuit from even back. Make sure it's in working order, and throw me in a chamber.
But someone has to go.
Oh yeah. It can't be just me. Yeah. Put your money where your mouth is. I better be standing across from a scientist who's wearing the exact same suit, and we're going head to head and see who.
Dude, if it was just you, if that was your challenge, they would already throw you in there.
Like, oops, we found the one flawed one.
That's true. That's true. 2 suits. Sorry. One for me, one for the scientists. It's not just me. You're absolutely right. And see who drops first.
Okay, that's an interesting point about that. The other thing too, you'd mentioned about the 4K camera, and I don't know, I don't think this question came through, but really for anybody who wants to take this question, I mean, it would seem simple that they would stick a 4K, a GoPro, whatever, on one of these rovers that's on the moon and just turn the sucker around, and there's the flat Earth dead, right? I think we know why they haven't done that, but for some of the people out here that would like, wow, that would be a real pretty definitive, undeniable evidence. Why haven't they done that? I mean, anybody want to take that one? Or anybody?
Well, I'll tell you why I think they haven't done it, because they can't do it, number one. But I heard somebody bring this up. I think it was Jaron and David Weiss when they went on a podcast, and they were like, they were submitting the 10 things they wanted the globe Earth proponents to provide, or science to provide, and one of them was exactly that. Put a 4K camera on the moon. Hey, look, we have one side of the moon that is always facing the Earth. Put it on there, point it straight up, and this is going to be the most popular live stream. Everybody's going to be able to go there anytime, see, home, right? You're going to be able to sell Coca-Cola and Chevy truck advertising. It's going to make a ton of money. Anybody's going to pay to, any of the big companies are going to pay to advertise on that thing, because it's going to be the most watched live stream ever. And we were there in the 60s and 70s, and we're still not doing it. I don't think it's happening because they can't. That's my 2 cents.
Great.
Anybody else?
Thank you. Anybody else want to? Brad pretty sums it up, I think. Oh, Dan's got it.
I'd say they don't even have to go to the moon. They could put the camera on any of the geostationary satellites that are at 40,000 kilometers of altitude.
Yeah.
And they launch those all the time.
Yeah, all the tens of thousands of ones that are out there. Yep. All right, I think we're back to Chad. Chad, what's your most convincing biblical evidence that we do not live on a spinning ball?
Okay, not to sound like a smart aleck here, but it's the Bible, period, because from start to finish, the whole thing, the biblical evidence is the consistency. From start to finish, spanning 1,500 years, 66 books, it is extremely consistent. All of the descriptions that This Earth that we live on is not moving. We are stationary. This Earth is not moving. We're not flying through space anywhere. You know, the Earth is set on pillars. It's set on foundations. There is a firmament over us. Some versions say dome. There is a boundary around the Earth that is holding in the oceans. You know, this circle of the Earth. God inscribed a circle on the face of the deep. And so it's the consistency. So it's not like, well, Chad, give me your 2 best verses. It's way more than that. It's the consistency of verse after verse after verse after verse, and it becomes monotonous. There are so many consistent examples. So that's my answer.
I like that. And I know that a lot of us have heard that the Bible is a flat earth book, period, from beginning to end. All right. So I think this is the last question, and this is for everybody. Is that correct? Yep. All right. This is for the panel. If you have an answer, you can just start, and then we'll just go all the way down. We hear so much talk and information about flat earth, but what proof do we have that the earth is flat? Is it a metaphor or is it a fact?
It's an absolute fact. I mean, it comes down to where is the curvature? There is none. We cannot find it. At 8 inches per mile squared, the curvature formula, it's just not there. We're seeing things that are way too far in the distance that we should be able to see. It started off with, this is a mirage, with the Chicago skyline. And, people weighed in on it. But the problem is now we're into infrared. And infrared is cutting through and it's going so much further to I think close to 200 miles, on an airplane, close to 1,000 miles, they're seeing things. It's an impossibility. And people will say, well, maybe we're just on a lot larger, Earth. The fact of the matter is that everything that we've been taught is a lie then. They have to start from scratch either way. It's just like Chad said, and many of the other speakers through this weekend, the Bible is very clear. The earth does not move. It is flat. It's immovable. There is a firmament with the sun, moon, and stars inside. Satan's agenda has been to try to destroy every ounce of what the Bible says. From the very beginning, the Genesis account is the foundation. Just like 9/11, when you take out a foundation, which what they did at 9/11, the building falls. And when you take out Genesis as the foundation of the Bible, the rest of it falls. And that was the one thing that Satan wanted to do, to destroy the Bible without even being violent in one way, just making people doubt it. Just like Jared Cressman was saying, the questions. Did God really say? Did God really say that the earth is still and stationary? Look what science has said. Maybe the Bible, making us doubt and question. It's just destroying the credibility of the Bible, and it's been there from day one.
Wow.
Yeah, I agree with Robbie. It always came down to math for me. I mean, math is considered to be the hardest of the sciences. It's you can't fake math. When I started realizing that there were distances you could see things that you shouldn't, that was pretty plain and simple in my mind. It was like, this is undeniable. This is mathematics.
I'm sort of new to the flat Earth kind of thing. I help people look better, feel better, think clearly. So I don't have anything intelligent to say about it.
Thanks, Al.
My one thing is, my first thing is, do you see a curve or do you feel movement? Pretty simple. And yes, I definitely believe it's flat.
My quick answer is going to be, water is flat, and we're supposed to be on a ball that is 70 to 75% water. And so we're telling me we're going to get the 360-degree, sphere thing out of 25% of land. That one people have a little bit of hard time kind of comprehending what they think they believe. Dan.
I'm not convinced by the flat Earth model. If somebody put a gun on my head, I'd say it's a sphere in a heartbeat. I know, don't lynch me. Anyway, I would say that I'm impressed by what I've heard here. In fact, what Robbie just said about people measuring a flat Earth over 1,000 miles is impressive. That would deserve some scientific investigation. I'd say that I'm not convinced that for the couple of hours I've viewed videos online about flat Earth and what I've listened here, I'm still waiting for somebody to destroy these astronomical observations that were made a few hundred years ago when telescopes started to be available that yield fairly simple mathematical formulations of celestial movements around the sun that would lead to enormously complicated formulae if the Earth was to be flat. So, and I would get back to my pet topic of 9/11, that I would respectfully advise my flat Earth people to go to the scientific work that exists on the round Earth and see the error. There must be somewhere an error in the observations or the calculations, see what it is, and prove that it destroyed the whole edifice.
Thank you, Dan. And what I like about Dan's answer is that was me. You know, that was me before I spent a lot of time. So the fact that you're asking these questions, go out, you know, we want to encourage you to go find the answers to those questions, right? Let's do that. Yeah. Because we've all been there, right? And I love that. And that was one of the things that was most important to me about this conference is, number one, we're all on different areas of our biblical understanding. You know, there's different levels of Christians in here or non-Christians. And the fact that you're asking these questions, that is exactly what this thing was about. So I want to thank you for that.
Well, I agree with what Robbie said. Joe, you stole my answer.
Oh, sorry,
so, the surface of water always measures as level, as flat. The distances we're getting at now with lasers is, I think, almost up to 40 miles now. We should experience curves over 300 or 400 feet. It's not there. We're measuring this with the laser and seeing if there's any hump of water in between 2 points, and it's just not there. So as we get better with lasers and we get better with distances, I know the FE Core team is planning one from England to from the Netherlands to England. That's gonna be over 100 miles. If things continue like this, you know, we'll be able to show some pretty, I think, substantial scientific evidence that the surface always is flat. Okay, there is no curve to it. And then, like what Joe was saying, we're told 70% of the Earth is water. So extrapolate that across the plane. You know, where is this curve exactly going to be? And that was the thing between that and what Robbie said about being able to see so far. You know, we shouldn't be able to see those things. So those are the things that I think are the proof that we have right now. I was fortunate enough. I've been working a lot with Dr. John Dee. Maybe you've seen some of his YouTube videos. He's a PhD scientist. Just recently has been taking lasers out over the south coast of England, and over 10 miles, which I think is about, I can't remember, is it 66.6 feet? Funny how the math works out, 8 inches per mile squared. He got his, he didn't have a Nikon P900, but a camera like that. He made I think it was a 2.5 meter long tube, I believe about 10 or, no, it wasn't, I can't remember how wide it was. He's able to put the lens of his camera in there, and he got the whole setup at 8 centimeters above the tide. And he shot out over across the south coast of England from one pier to another. It was about 10 miles. And at 8 centimeters, he was able to, again, he's looking for about 66 feet of hidden height on the other side, but he was able to see the lights on the beach on the other side. And he's publishing his findings online. So when we go out there all the time and we start getting comments and we get feedback that there's no scientific evidence for a flat Earth. And I would say that is extremely wrong. There is tons of it, and we're building and compiling, as Bob Nodell says from Globebusters, a preponderance of evidence, scientific evidence, that the Earth is flat and stationary.
Awesome. Thanks, Paul.
I would treat this question like a court case, which I often do, which is, can I prove that the world is flat right now? No. No, I can't. But I can create so much massive, reasonable doubt in the globe that you have nowhere else to turn but some sort of flat Earth model, which is what we can all agree on, you know, the flat Earth here on this panel. It's like, yeah, we don't agree on a lot of things. You know, if we had our top 100 of the different aspects of a flat Earth, we couldn't agree on all of them. But we absolutely know that it's not a globe, and that's where I start. And if they don't have that doubt in a globe yet, email me and I'll send it to you.
Thanks, Mark.
All right, so for the first question, you know, in my opinion, I think the president could come on the TV and say the Earth is flat. He could spill the beans on absolutely everything, and in my opinion, most people would not believe him and still believe the lie. That's my opinion. For many reasons. And so I don't think we're ever going to prove this to, the majority by any means. I hope so. That'd be fantastic. I really, really hope that's the case. But I don't see that happening. And so it depends what proof. What is the proof to who? Who am I trying to prove this to? And so for me, it was about proving it to myself. And so the two things for me is obviously the Bible, first and foremost. Secondly, was standing out over Puget Sound with a telescope and doing all these math like countless people have talked about and seeing things that mathematically is impossible for me to be able to see on a spinning ball globe Earth that we're told. And so that was for me, proving it to myself. And so the other part is it metaphor or fact? Being flat Earth. And so I want to kind of back up a second and say that when my wife hears the term flat Earth, she goes, well, it's not flat, because there's mountains and valleys. And so to me, I kind of have a preface to that answer, is that there's mountains, valleys, rivers, oceans, everything that we see. But to me, the term flat Earth is a broad plain, spreading out for thousands of miles. And in general, there's absolutely no curve, and that, it's absolutely not a globe. So that's my long-winded answer to that.
Great. Thank you, guys. Thanks, Chad. All right, that is our Q&A panel. God, can you give it up to all these great people that have been speaking and pouring into us all weekend? And before we conclude with our final guest speaker, I just want to say thank you to every single one of you for being here and making this possible. I think Southern California needs a lot more of this, and we'll talk about whether there'll be another one or not, but I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, every single one of you guys and gals, for being here and making this thing happen. So thank you.